Rudaksh, I think you could start the recording. Yep, great. Thank you. So, debating on the motion, this house regrets the glamorization of startup culture that encourages people to start their own companies rather than pursue traditional career paths, starting the debate with Prime Minister.
Hi, can I check if I'm audible?
Yep, both audible and visible.
Okay. I shall then, okay, I prefer my POIs done verbally, and give me a few seconds to drink some water and start my time. Thank you. Okay. Just again, like, sorry, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I shall start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I would first like to begin with my speech with some framing. So let me first characterize what do these traditional career paths look like. These traditional career paths look like to work under someone, to work under a trusted corporation. This can look like becoming an accountant, becoming an auditor, becoming a workforce employee, and things like that. And what do we do? And from what do we gain from these like traditional career paths? What do we gain? We gain mainly experience. Experience. This can look like who to trust, who not to trust, what to do, what not to do, and things like that. So now moving on to my status quo. So my status quo, what is the status quo? Everyone is broke, everyone wants money. It's a capitalistic society, and that in the current society, and that that's my first part. My second part is that people prioritize studying over networking. And the third thing is that a lot of people are pushed by money. This can be due to high inflation, high rent, AI taking over jobs, thinking about how to make it big, placing an importance on, and then like financial stability and literacy are really, really important. And the fourth thing is that experience is really important. This is especially true in, like, for example, in managing businesses, in getting like the necessary connections to gain resources. And moving on to my fifth part of status quo, which is what do these startups need? Startups, they need good, feasible ideas. They usually need innovation. That's how they attract investors, right? They want something new. They want something eye-catching. And these startups usually involve investment, be that from outsider investments, which I said includes, which you need like innovation and things like that in order to make it happen, or they invest in stocks in order to gain the money. And stocks are basically like, and what how do we characterize stocks? Stocks are something that are high risk. Stocks are something that it's unpredictable. You can never tell what will happen and things like that. And now and so like Okay, now moving on to the glamorization of like how the glamorization of startup culture, how does that look like? So this glamorization usually takes place through social media. And who does these, and who are the main target audience for these types of social media? That being young people, people who are fresh out of college, people who are in high school and things like that. And what does this lead to? And how does this glamorization look like? This glamorization usually looks like people showing up the bright side of startup. Imagine Instagram reels showing you the fun in a very like bright tone. Like how do these startups, like you having fun, you smile, you like having just a great time. You don't have to work for yourself. You can wake up at any time you want and things like that. But what happens is that they usually only show the bright side of the startup, and they don't see the hard work, the grueling hours it takes to make it necessary to make it. And then another thing they glamorize is succeeding at a young age, succeeding maybe in high school or succeeding after college. Moving on, we have and what does this happen? People only see the end goal of money. What does this look like? This looks like having flexible working hours. You're your own boss. You have a high salary. People, as said, they don't see the grueling process. And who are the main people behind this glamorization? This looks like This looks like CEOs who made it. People who actually like succeeded to it. And this leads to these people who are watching it having the assumption that you can easily succeed. But these are bad because of two things. Number one, this can lead to survivorship bias because we only see those who are successful, those who actually manage to make their startup company a success. We don't see the millions who fail, the millions who just have a rough idea of what to do, and then the next day they give up and things like that. They never say how not fun it is, how much you have to overwork and things like that, and they never say how many connections they actually take in order to make this culture a success. I'll take that POI later after I finish this. So what does this lead to? This glamorization leads to a lot of people wanting to do it. And what happens when a lot of people want to do it? This leads to the market becoming more and more competitive. And when it's more competitive, although yes, people are more willing to like make it better, but it's also harder to succeed because people lack the necessary experience. Because because the glamorization encourages people to start young. And they also encourage people to start with nothing. So this makes a false narrative that you have to start from zero, you have to build from the scratch in order to have like a true startup or things like that. And this can lead to like survivorship bias, only focusing on those who succeed. And I'll take that POI.
Thank you. Does the government side concede on including media outlets and government narratives, ergo leading of policies pushed out due to this culture instead of just restricting it on social media? Thank you.
We're seeing that the main form of glamorization usually takes place through social media, and furthermore, governments that encourage people to, you said right, there are policies encouraging people to work for the government. There are also like schools like encouraging people to like take a more financially stable career path and things like that. So now moving on to the startup culture, what does this startup culture look like? This startup culture usually looks like a one man. This usually starts with one man, or at most maybe like just 5 university students. It cannot be that many because it's just unlikely, it's unrealistic. So what does this lead to? This looks like a culture where you're managing, you're working, you're planning, you're organizing, you're setting up pretty much everything. You are doing everything. The company at first is going to start from you. It's going to be a really lonely at the start. But the culture is encouraging to do it now, to do it before you have the stability. And it also looks like you have to sacrifice a lot of things. It encourages high stakes. You have to take risks. And why this is best? And why this is bad is because you just don't have it. You just don't have the necessary. It's like unlikely for the average Joe to have the necessary resources in order to make this success. And the glamorization also looks like going big or go home, raising the stakes in order to succeed. And that is just not true because it's unlikely, it's not confirmed, and it just looks like just having fun. It doesn't show like the grueling hours and things like that. So our mechanization is that how this will work is that we will first work for the company, we will choose a traditional career path, and then if you're stable enough, then you just keep working for the company if you make enough money. And if you really want to make a startup, you work for the company first and then you make a startup. So what does this lead to? This leads to you being able to gain experience. You're able to gain at least some form of like maybe connections. You know certain people who can help you. You are able to see the world more. You are able to learn more. You know how to face the world. You know how to face the world better. You know how to like balance like actual work-life culture. Furthermore, you can also develop soft skills, things like critical thinking, financial literacy, reading the room, reading body language, social skills, which are, the importance of connection and things like that. And it can also teach you how to prioritize, like, for example, work-life balance, certain aspects of your startup that these glamorization usually just aren't able to show you, like understanding how difficult it is, like learning endurance and things like that. So now moving on to my first argument, which it helps you build a steadier foundation. And why do we say this? Number one, it helps you have time to build experiences, to learn more things. You gain experience, you learn from the higher ups from your companies and in and outs of your business. So you're actively observing you're actively observing what to do in your company. And even if the company fails, you can at least learn to avoid their mistakes, and you won't immediately lose everything you have. And that's I'm proud to propose.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for what was a wonderful speech. Now to start the clash, we now call on Leader of Opposition.
All right, 1 second, I gotta get my code. Okay, am I visible and audible?
Yep.
Okay, great. So before I start, I would take my POIs at an open poll at the 4 to 5 minute. So any POIs could be either typed out or verbally told to me at that period of time. I would see and I would reply. So with this, I would like to start my case in 3, 2, 1. Now, good morning, to everyone. This is from the Leader of Opposition. I would like to first call out the government for having a really, really soft stance. If you're glamorizing on traditional careers, it makes zero sense on you, encouraging those older ones after retiring or getting laid off by these careers to go a startup. So let's keep it on the track and just traditional careers, all right? So the premise of today's debate on our side is to defend the current status quo for the glamorization, in which characterized in the following statements. We believe that glamorization has to be based on a real case. In their world, they say that, glamorizing has a basic narrative saying that you need to start and success young. However, young prodigies are rare anomalies, especially in entrepreneurship. not the rule. Glamorizing startup is not about promoting youth wealth or massive upfront capital. It's about like inspiring like a mindset, and the mindset can lead to several impacts. So back on the characterization, right? It looks at four things. First, media outlets with posts of affirmation towards a set individual with a startup. Second, society collectively encourages such behavior and has high tolerance towards the failure of an entrepreneurship or failure of a startup. Three, online and offline narratives on believing hard work leads to success, meritocracy, and there is supportiveness to small and medium companies, meaning that people in my world are more willing to support these small companies rather than big corporations. Four, the government welfare systems and subsidies in my world, they will be increasingly better on small and medium enterprises, SMEs, and enterprises starting individuals, meaning even if the individual fails, in comparison, the individual would have a better risk bailout system in our world compared to theirs. Before we go on, right, we have to meet a consensus that both sides, by glorifying, does not mean eradicating the other side. Your side will still have entrepreneurs, our side will still have traditional careers. So now onto the characterization, right? They told us a lot about traditional career path. They claim it has stability, it claims it has like experience, right? But they didn't actually characterize what is like for a startup culture. So what is a startup culture? Startup culture means on meritocracy systems, meaning based on hard work, meaning based on merit. Second, startup cultures require the individual or require the individuals to be very cross-functional, be very cross-departments. Skills are very vast and very generalized. You choose what you want to specialize in. This is a very holistic skill acquisition. Three, startup culture has a relatively flat hierarchy, meaning that the person in control has a very large span of control rather than a very authoritative hierarchical like triangle structure. Number four, it is very innovation centric, as they had mentioned, which we agree. In a rise of recent years, tech-driven startups, especially in AI, right? These entrepreneurships require new ideas and new perspectives. With small investment, can often bring huge gain. Take open AI for an example. Okay, now onto that traditional career path, right? My BLO would elaborate more. Onto our status quo, we not like to add up onto there something, as they have said, everyone is broke. We believe it's a very niche and very surface level of understanding. We have to understand that the reason behind this is four things. First, the stagnation of status, leading coming from the inequality of wealth. Career advancement is now locked, even in startups, even in their role of traditional careers. This is something that both sides need to agree and concede to. Second, there's then complacency in traditional pathways. Several features, especially in Southeast Asian countries in traditional careers, right, are three things: obedience, risk aversion, and seniority cultures, especially the elderly getting a better opportunity than the younger, even with the same merit. Number three, skill obsolescence and tool specialization. We argue that in current traditional workplace, right, narrow roles train worker for obsolete corporation structures, leaving them like completely unprepared for a layoff or any like fast evolving global economy. So that after they get laid off, they have nowhere else to go. Number four, the rise of AI, the massive wave of corporate tech layoff, especially in Intel, especially in Dell, those MNC companies, right, are driven by companies using AI as a cover to eliminate like middle management and freeze entry level hiring, so that only the top 1% or top 10% will not be affected. The other 90% will still be affected, and we are debating on the 90% today. Laying off hundreds and thousands and millions are very common in today's corporate world right now. It must be considered that startups will fail somehow. Startups are not ensured 100% guarantee. Choosing startup culture meaning accepting a high statistical probability of you may fail. However, startup industry, right, if we're talking about statistical math, right, the statistical failure of 99 ventures is completely outweighed by even one single monumental success. Take AI for example. One open AI succeeding is worth 99 of them failing, because the utility of society is what we are measuring today. It is unavoidable that we have to mention that in the future, right, company and corporate world will go more and more freelancing and individualistic, because companies are cutting full-time jobs and turning to AI, making traditional 9 to 5 careers actually harder to find, while driving a massive boom in contract work, meaning that 9 to 5 will become more and more oppressive, more and more exploitative, and more locked. And most of the people, right, will operate independently as specialists using AI to handle multiple clients. We're talking about the younger generation, which will they choose a better career or better degree that can adapt to the future. Now, for the burden of proof, right, both sides have to prove which side could hit our social metrics as mentioned below. Three things: the society, mobility, and production, measure from utility the whole society. Second, the political distribution of power. Three, the individuals that are influenced by such culture and their well-being. So I'll elaborate my points in two things before I continue. Any POIs? Okay, great. I'll continue. My point will be one, the positive cycle through society in two layers: the economic mobility, and second, the political shift on power. First, on the economic mobility will be significantly increased, and the volatility of market, especially in stock markets, will be significantly decreased in two layers. First, the funds and subsidies allocated by the government or private funding organizations, which include angel investors, private companies such as JB Morgan and stuff. Number two, the money cash flow between existing corporations with new startups would increase the mobility and productivity of the whole economic cycle. A culture, right, that is saturated with founders and risk takers forces the government to stop wasting billions and millions to build up very stagnant legacy corporations. Take the 2008 financial crisis, for example, right? If the funds used to save AIG, used to save the JP Morgan and stuff, if the funds used to save huge banks, right, these funds can be used on subsidizing people. Can you use the increase of social and economic equality and opportunity? Such huge trillions and millions, right, can be allocated to such as portable healthcare benefits, universal upskilling grants that can protect people rather than just protect these failing institutions. Because in your world, where in huge institutions would continue to grow, and I assure you will grow due to your glamorization of traditional jobs, this just increases the risk of a huge market failure, as it is unavoidable. It is a 25-year capitalism recession. Number two, political shift on power. It will grant citizens a higher leverage that can combat with today's status quo of stagnation. Because us as a society, when we move towards a very entrepreneurial base, right, we corporate lobbies who rely on government bailouts are weakened. We do not trust them as much as possible, and we do not rely on them anymore. Politicians are forced to stop running from platforms of like, oh, saving jobs, saving corporates, and the electorates, right, will stop asking the state to be their employer and start demanding themselves for a platform for innovation. The impact analysis here is three things. First, when the majority of the workforce adopts to an entrepreneur mindset, the political asks change, asks innovation. The society direction is more towards innovation, which is more and more crucial in our status quo. As I tell you, AI can take up the entry level and middle management jobs. Number two, by discouraging entrepreneurship and agile risk taking in their way and promoting traditional models will cause two things: brain drain capital and talent away from high growth sectors, leading to economic stagnation and national decline. Number two, they are succumbing to the rise of wealth concentration that will be worsened in their work. They mentioned that capitalism is bad. However, in their work, if they're glamorizing this, right, inevitably they will cause a more concentration and more stagnated world. With this, we are extremely proud to oppose.
Thank you so much, Leader of Opposition, Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep, both audible and
Okay.
visible.
Give me a few seconds to compose myself. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So first of all, I'd like to make a few rebuttals to what side opposition has claimed. So side opposition has claimed that we're just framing that they have claimed that young prodigies are very highly unlikely and they're an anomaly. But again, side opposition is clearly ignoring our framing because we have never said anything about young prodigies. You're right, it is unlikely, but it's more about people starting young because again, we are focusing on the glamorization of this startup culture. Now, we have already framed that startup culture looks like usually glamorizing that it's a one-person job, or even if it's at most a five-person job where everyone is focusing on managing and working and planning and organizing and setting up without stability or a lack of experience. And we've already framed and stressed the importance of experience in the management of a business. Now, secondly, I'd like to address the claim that side opposition has made that's it leads to complacency and risk aversions, and also how with AI, lots of jobs and lots of people are being laid off. So you're just encouraging more companies to be started. You're encouraging everyone to start companies to prevent from being fired. But how are you going to compete? How are you going to compete in such a competitive market where everyone is just starting up their own companies? Now, they've also mentioned how OpenAI has such high success that it's worth 99% of failed companies. But how are you going to prove that it's likely to reach that level with your average startup? Now, this is, again, just survivalship bias because you're seeing one successful case and assuming that's the case for everyone. Now, I'm going to move on. Before I move on to my arguments, I'm going to, again, stress the end goal. Now, our end goal is to find career stability. Even if it's through starting a company, we're going to prove how we can both start a company and find stability better without the glamorization of this startup culture. Now, for my first argument, again, like my previous speaker has stated, we can build a steadier foundation without the glamorization of this culture. We have a lot more time to build connections, to learn, to gain experience, and to learn from higher ups in companies. We can learn the ins and outs of businesses because you're actively observing the success of companies who actually have made it. And even if these companies fail, you can avoid their mistakes in the future. Now, secondly, you can earn opportunities. Let's say you get to rise up the corporate ladder based off of your promotions. You get to close deals with other companies. You get to learn under your job and build connections for your future. Now, the impact of this is that we have a higher chance of succeeding when starting a company in the future. we already have more experience, which is something we prove why it's important in framing. And we have a lot more information. We have a lot more connections. We have sponsors, collaborations, and opportunities with other companies who are more stable than we are when we're starting up a company. Secondly, we have more stability because we don't just, no, thank you. It's a lot more stable because we don't just succeed in starting a company, but we get to survive. We don't just make it past the entry level. We actually make sure that it's a long-standing company. Now, inside opposition's world, first of all, yes, they take less time to actually start a company, but we're willing to trade that off because the time that we spend is a lot more valuable because again, we're spending it on gaining education, on social networking and gaining experience. Versus side opposition's world, they're quick, but they earn nothing from it. And again, they're highly unlikely to survive in such a competitive market. Secondly, it's a lot more rushed, which leads to an unsteady foundation. So they have no connections, no sponsorships, no deals, no one to help them. And they can get easily overwhelmed with this lack of experience. And they have yet to prove how they're okay with this lack of experience. As we have already framed, that startup culture is encouraging young people to make it big and make it young, to take risks. Now, with this lack of experience, they don't know how to properly tackle and solve problems. And with a lack of experience, they have no idea how to manage a business. It's unlikely to get staff because first of all, they're a new company. And even if they do get staff, it's unlikely to get qualified ones because qualified staff members would mean that they have more experience, which means they have stable careers. Because why would they quit their stable careers for a new company? And because they're understaffed, they need all they can get. So they can't pick and choose. Now, even if they do get qualified workers because they have more experience, you're out. You're not going to be the CEO or the leader of your company anymore. Now these qualified staff members will exploit you and you get less benefits. Now, thirdly, in your world, it's a lot easier for people to give up on startup companies because again, the glamorization is about only seeing the end goal. Many young people, the people who are planning to start up companies, they don't see the process of how long it takes to actually form a startup. Now, as we've already mentioned, how lots of this glamorization is based off of social media. Imagine you watching a 30-second reel. 10 years fit into 30 seconds. You're not going to actually acknowledge the long process of what it takes to start up a company. Now, in our world, the time we get to gain experience and starting, yes, it is a lot longer. But again, we're willing to trade that off because the time to succeed will be much less in comparison to side oppositions. No, thank you. And plus, there's a higher likelihood with all the resources that we get from the time that we have. Now, secondly, our values and experience are a lot stronger because we gain a more realistic view. Without this glamorization, we're allowing ourselves to make realistic decisions about whether or not I can actually make it, whether or not I should spend my resources on this. I'm not going to blindly I'm not going to blindly take risks. I'm not going to raise the stakes just because people are telling me to. Because the glamorization is mostly about saying that you have to take risks. No, you have to take risks to be able to succeed, to achieve success. Now, in our world, this builds endurance and resilience, and you get to have networking, you get to have connections and mentorship. You can receive advice and receive experience. Now, why startup culture specifically, it's likely to fail because again, first of all, there's pointless innovations that no one actually wants because it's unlikely for you to come up with feasible, new, refreshing, and strong, good ideas with your lack of experience. You have no clear direction of what to do. With this lack of experience, you trust the wrong people and there's too much competition with a similar product or similar startup companies who have the same ideas as you. Now, there's also poor timing because glamorization encourages everyone to start now as soon as possible because again, you're glamorizing that you make it big, you make it young, to go big or go home. But again, we're stressing that time is necessary to build a steady foundation in order to start up a company, if that's what you want in the future, to compete against other people and to actually survive in the market. Now, therefore, governments investing in these startups are bad, just like side opposition said that they were going to have subsidies. Now, this is a complete waste of money due to the highly volatile companies, and as well as with high failure rates. They're going to realize that there's these flaws and it reduces the subsidies towards these startup companies. Plus, they don't have to invest in risky startups Because if they want to invest in businesses, they might as well invest in stable businesses. So government has a stronger incentive to invest in strong companies and ignore these startups. And that's all for my speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister. Deputy Leader of Opposition.
All right. Am I audible and visible?
Yes to both.
All right. Firstly, I'll take POI's verbal. However, if they're inaudible, I will ask for them to be placed in chat. My pronouns are she, her, and I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Today's motion is where you are given a choice. Do you want to start up or do you want a traditional career? The whole government's case is very soft-stanced and very uncharitable, as my leader of opposition has already pointed out. Judge, we refuse this very biased framing, as that clearly is not the motion. If you regret the glamorization, you must show us a framing on what your world will look like without the glamorization, not whatever they're debating on right now. Now, firstly, addressing the Prime Minister of Proposition's claims. They claim that people will gain experience from the workforce. The issue in Proposition's case is the fact that this experience would amount to nothing if it doesn't foster further improvement within the workforce. Experience does not necessarily equal to greater growth, which will be elaborated on later within my speech, clearly pointed out. Apart from this, experience can also be gained from beginning startups. While in the workforce, many systems may stem from outdated methods that may have more effective methods to produce the same or better outcome, where experimentation and on-hand experience is more readily available during startups than in traditional work. Now, apart from this, addressing the Deputy Prime Minister next, how will they ask, how will we succeed in today's society with the mass competition of different startups? Yes, we acknowledge that our side of the debate has competition, but the proposition has competition within the corporations. In fact, potentially even worse competition within the corporations. Their side of the corporations being all towards a same or similar goal, while startup corporations have multiple different variants and types, which dilutes the competition to individual markets between less startup companies than people within a corporation per market. And people in the corporation strive to get a higher position. Many people under a single branch vying for a singular position within the corporation, therefore determining them all as competition towards a similar goal, while ours is diluted into multiple different types of competitions within a different type of market, each within their own self. Apart from that, they've also said that the more qualified members within our speech would exploit the members. The exploitation is not exclusive to Proposition's end. In fact, being more likely to occur on Proposition's end as a whole. As startup companies would value their members more, while in a larger corporation, a system where the exploitation would stem from multiple different factors, also to be addressed within my speech alongside Prime Minister's claim on experience. Accept?
If you were to say that I forgot, never mind.
That's taking too long. Okay, whatever. Continue on. Now, within our case as opposition, glamorization of traditional career paths feed the capitalists and leave the workers hungry. Traditional career paths, 9 to 5 jobs where one attempts to join a larger corporation in hopes of climbing the corporate ladder. The proposition rather encourages people to become part of the workforce of the larger corporation, laboring under the corporations that cycle capitalism within the current status quo. In turn, the larger flow of workers in propositions will cause the larger market of these workers for these corporations to pick at. And due to the heavy compressed load of competition between workers within a corporation, when attempting to undertake higher positions, it causes a gap easily utilized by exploiters, who will in turn exploit the workers under a false promise of higher positions, whereas the managers may simply keep the worker working under the current position, as they've been well-versed and forced to consistently stagnate within that role. Apart from this, complacency within the workforce. Okay, first of all, the POI, if you manage to remember, please type it within the chat. I'll check it later within around the 5-minute mark. Now, moving on. Complacency within the workforce, where I address the so-called experience gained in the workforce doesn't necessarily entail growth of skill sets. As the opposition, we fight to reduce complacency in the workforce. To elaborate, the workers are taught to conform to the needs of a corporation, whether that benefits them or not. The social engineering within a person when attempting to climb the corporate ladder is to make themselves most appealing to whoever is able to provide them with the position. They help to make themselves noticeable in their skills. However, being forced to be appeased by whatever the people who can give them the positions force them into, to appease the higher ups themselves in all false hopes of a greater position. It forces them to be satisfied with what they're given, a form of complacency the government wishes to us as the opposition wishes to eradicate via the glamorization of entrepreneurship. We provide them with alternatives to this culture, to believe in the fostering of oneself, to view the standpoints outside of what a corporation ladder describes. We glamorize entrepreneurship. In turn, providing people with a viewpoint whether that matters the most is not how the higher ups of a company treats them, but rather if the decision of their career is truly the best inside and outside of the traditional workforce. We encourage the people to be open in their options of career, widening the view to corporate ladder causes, which is tunnel vision into the traditional workforce. We cause people to be less susceptible towards the tunnel vision, and as a whole, glamorization of entrepreneurship being the modernization of a person's ideas. Apart from this, the stagnation of the skill sets of per worker, while entrepreneurship provides encouragement of a learning culture. When a person uptakes entrepreneurship, it encourages them to adopt skill sets for the production or setting up of a company. On the other hand, in the traditional workforce, people are prone to stagnation of their skill sets. As described before, being forced into the best fit interest of the corporation, even if it exploits the workers. As a whole, the traditional workforce forces people to never truly learn a better method, never truly forces them to learn how to grow. Meanwhile, on our side, the people get to learn further skill sets, get to innovate themselves, get to explore their world as a whole. Apart from the seniority culture within a traditional career path, it is detrimental to the progression of a person within the corporate ladder. The destruction of meritocracy, which is a system a person relies on to improve their current position through the preference of those experienced in the methods a corporation takes. Even the newer may hold a greater skill set than the experience in education or general capabilities. Now I'll view the... Okay. Never mind. No POIs. Now, moving on. To improve the current position through the preference of those experienced in the methods a corporation take, even if the newer hire may hold a greater skill set than the experience in education or general capabilities. Apart from this, entrepreneurship is essential. This is something that must be made clear, especially in innovation. As spoken on by my leader of opposition, entrepreneurship and its experimentation is where some of the greatest inventions and pushes moving forward the society originates from. Example, Steve Jobs and Wozniak's invention to the digital world, operations to produce inventions that could improve the environment stemming from the startup. And this is what us as opposition stands for. We stand for entrepreneurship. In fact, the government stands for entrepreneurs to be at higher risk of falling and incompatibility to get up. Government would prefer people to avoid entrepreneurship, where the proposition has made it clear that they would rather people undertake traditional career paths rather than making a startup company. Without the former convincing glamorization on startup companies being written to society, therefore affecting the ideals of a government due to an increased general liking towards the startup companies. Following this, our government would implement more aversions to the fall of people who fail at startups, since we prefer startup companies due to its glamorization. Overall, the opposition lacks a flow of innovation, exchanging it for the complacency of the people and have no real way to combat the issues that present themselves within the corporate ladder due to such exploitation. With this, I am proud to oppose in my stance.
Thank you so much, Deputy Leader of Opposition. Government Whip.
Hello, may I check if I'm audible?
Yep, both visible and audible.
Okay, please give me a moment to compose myself and my information and okay, sorry for the long wait. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First of all, I like to start with some rebuttals. The first thing is that the op team keeps misunderstanding our glamorization case. First thing is our definition and framing is not uncharitable in the slightest. In fact, it's a very realistic framing. So glamorization is a culture, and as you said, it is also a mindset. And by showing these people only 30 seconds of what a startup culture looks like, what the success looks like, you are just plaguing their minds. You are deluding the young generation of today to believe that the chances of them succeeding is going to be very, very high, letting them fantasize like the end of just only the end goal of these independent companies, and which is again the only thing you've ever talked about. You guys don't talk about how you want to achieve this, about how how these people who are deluded and who already glamorize the existence of like having a giant company on their own to manage on their own is going to like make anything better. Because again, as you said, startup companies are going to work they're gonna happen and exist in both worlds. We're just saying in our world, it's a lot more likelier that they're going to succeed and attain all the benefits that Op has said. So is again like the social media and articles, it is about what they feed you. They literally only feed you like being the CEO of a company and like the beautiful ending for
UI.
everything, right? And yes.
Thank you. So, what is the justification in your world without the glamorization on startup? Will somehow cause experienced workers to suddenly become a startup in your world?
Well, because first of all, they are going to understand that well, because there's a lot more experience, because you have seen that these people up there, they are succeeding, they are thriving, and they'll inspire seeing them do all this and being exposed to like a toxic workplace is going to push you away from this workplace. And if you want, you will, because then you already have enough experience, you'll be able to separate yourself from a company. No, I'm not even done explaining it, bro. They're gonna separate themselves from the company and they'll be able to make their own company, start from zero. But they're not starting from zero like what Op is painting here. They are starting from a foundation they have built through years and years of experience. So, anyways, as I was saying, this the glamorization is so the glamorization, meaning like the chance of anyone taking it upon themselves to think about what the process looks like before actually jumping into it, and then like trying to attain what the beautiful ending of like having $1 million and being able to change politics and everything is going to be super duper low, because again they're already playing with the mind, like the mindset, like, oh my gosh, I'm literally going to succeed, I'm going to succeed. That's why they're not going to understand, they're not going to have the foundation to actually and because they don't have the foundation, they're not going to succeed at all. Another thing is that a word about glamorization. You said many times that we don't have a counterfactual, like what our world without this glamorization looks like. Let me tell you right now. First of all, it's a higher success rate. It's better side to financial stability, people finding more jobs and being able to focus on their lives. You want to think as far as lobbying and changing the political stance. You can't you can't even do that if you're like stuck on like making this little startup company that you can't even manage properly because you don't have the experience or the foundation to even do that. And another thing you guys keep mentioning is complacency in workforce. First thing you do, it really doesn't matter. First thing to this is that it really doesn't matter if in the end you cannot make it out there. You say that like you are going to. It's just again like you don't prove how you're gonna get there. You don't prove that through thinking or believing that, oh, I'm literally going to win. That you are going to win. So it doesn't matter, because another thing is that complacency in workforce, it's not gonna kill you. Again, what we want is financial stability. What we want is for people to be able to find jobs and make money and be able to live their lives without being without the fear of like being broke, without the fear of not being able to feed their family or even feed themselves. Okay, complacency is going to happen. Plus, like, if you are to make your own startup company, complacency is also going to happen in your own world, but from your perspective. Because in the end, you are the ones going to be CEO. You will learn to drown in that feeling of being on top. You want to protect your position. Therefore, you are also going to indulge in corruption. Because just like it's not going to happen to yourself. It's going to happen to people who are under you. And although it might not be a hierarchy, you will still be in the most power. You are going to be still in a place of power. Therefore, people are still going to try to suck up to you. Therefore, your harm of complacency is completely washed. It's just that you are not the one affected. It is other people who are also trying to get on your level. So another thing is being able to innovate. So this is a shared benefit, because again, what we're saying is we want the foundation of being able to, want the foundation of knowing like how to manage stuff and how to speak with people, how to network before you actually start up your company. But then this, but like for an ops role, it's highly unlikely, because again, you don't tell us how you are going to maintain or like properly learn about like the possible risks and harms of being a startup company if you are literally just glamorizing it and believing that it is like the best decision that everyone can make. So in their world, the glamorization makes it harder for people to step away from their startups, and then this will cause like a sunken cost fallacy, meaning people are only seeing the positives. They're going to like take there's gonna be higher stakes, there's gonna be high interest loans, they're gonna find loan, and then when they like think they don't have enough money, they're gonna take these loans and they're gonna find loan sharks. They're gonna pour money into a failing project because again, they are lacking experience, they are lacking foundation to like be able to maintain this company and this startup. So, and everything is unlikely to change because again, you don't have the experience to identify the problems in your startup to like improve, because you don't, and then because like again, you don't have the experience or the foundation. So even if the lack of experience is important on the startup, yes, please.
Okay, since in your world you claim that the mindset does not cause for our startup entrepreneurs to actually go startup, so where are all these bad benefits coming from?
I don't understand that. I'm sorry. So basically, even if the lack of experience isn't important in that startup, how can you prove that? Because again, your case doesn't mention like how not having experience is going to help you like get that startup at all. All you're talking about is how startups are going to change the world, but you can't even achieve that if no one can succeed in a startup. So in our world, again, first thing, we are more aware of the harms of like having like starting a business on your own. So why this happens is because there are more discussions happening and there are more spotlights on failures. Another thing is because you're going to be in a workplace. If you're in the workplace, you're talking to a lot of people, and these people could include people who have startups. You can see how they do it, see what they're doing wrong, and be able to identify, first of all, identifying these harms, and then you'll be able to think to yourself how I could do this to like make it better. So you'll know how to build a stable company. The second thing is that this is all ignored in ops world. So people assume they will make it and be successful because of that, they'll keep taking more risks. So again, the sunken cost fallacy, where it's just investing in like a lost cause. So all right, instead of focusing on experience, since opposition keeps dismissing our case, let's focus on the culture of taking risks. In op, you are taking risks to solve aversion. You are literally gambling here. Let's say cryptocurrency, where you don't even really understand what cryptocurrency is about. You don't do extensive studying on like the rise and falls of like all of these statistics and everything. You are just randomly investing your money into stuff that like doesn't even make proper sense to you. You are making uncalculated risks. This is gambling. This isn't risk. This is gambling. You are encouraging, and by glamorizing this startup culture, you are just encouraging people to do that. And because of that, you're costing them your own, like you're wasting their time and their effort to make something that isn't even going to succeed or achieve all of your benefits. Because of that, project proposed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Government Whip, Opposition Whip.
Hi, wait, can I get like 20 seconds to wear my coat?
All right.
Okay, hi, am I visible and audible?
Yes to both.
Okay. Give me a minute. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the government's case today is deeply flawed. Their entire case is grossly naive and have never actually proved how the likelihood and experience part of things only exclusively applies on our side. They completely contradict their own case by saying that more experienced workers would want to switch to entrepreneurship to escape the toxic culture of the company. But the opposition's job today in this debate is to defend the glamorization of the traditional career path. How is this helping your case? Okay, so before I start with my rebuttals, let me address 2 points. Number 1, what is the justification of no glamorizations on startup culture will somehow cause experienced workers to suddenly want to engage in startups? Why, in your world, would they suddenly want to do this after they landed themselves in such a great traditional career path in the world? Number 2, they fail to show us a world, their world, where the glamorization exists, whilst it excludes the benefits from our side. They clearly show a soft stance, like my PM and DPMM has called out many times before. Now, onto my rebuttals. Number 1, they claimed that our side encourages people to start young and early. However, they have not proved to you how being encouraged to start early is necessarily a wrong thing. So in entrepreneurship, right, he or she can always try again after they fail. However, if you get laid off in a company in the context of a traditional job, right, they might never have the opportunity or the likelihood to succeed again. Number 2, they talk about survivorship bias and how we only see the ones that succeed and not the ones that fail. That's 2 layers to this rebuttal, okay? Number 1, the government grossly assumes that failing means to total loss. But let's shift to reality for a bit, right? Failure in entrepreneurship is essentially an asset. And even if the business closes, the founders still can acquire a skill set that can make them more aware to the future mistakes when they finally decide to try again. The government side wants to talk about experience, right? Our side fully believes that the experience that is gained after failing the startup is definitely more valuable and clearly outweighs whatever experience one can gain working in a repetitive and luck-based environment. Number 2, they try to tell you that the survivorship bias is exclusive to our side, but we need to acknowledge that there is also a clear survivorship bias in the corporate world too, which is your side. Think about it. We only know the few executives that are at the top of the ladder, at the top of the rank, right? That those that make it big as the company's CEO, as the founder, right? And they completely disregard and ignore the millions of workers that are still stuck in the lower ranks. Number 3, the proposition speaks on entrepreneurs having no experience, causing them to fail. However, the experience that they lack that is lacked, the government so-called speaks on, is flawed in the sense that they show no way of telling people the experience to become entrepreneurs, as they do not encourage the people with experience to attempt entrepreneurship, while our side rather causes people to consistently consider entrepreneurship in the first place. Now, let's make the differences between entrepreneurship and traditional jobs very clear and prove why our side clearly has the better benefits. On their side, they might argue that startup failure might ruin the lives of people, both, let's say, financially and psychologically, right? However, we argue that glamorizing traditional career paths in the first place, they will offer the same risks, if not worse. Let's revisit what my DPMs have stated, right? Number one, exploitation in the corporate field. Encouraging traditional career paths actually feeds into corporate capitalism, flooding the market with workers and allowing companies to actually exploit the competition by trapping employees in the lower level ranks and roles, and maybe give them false promises of promotion, right? Number two, workforce complacency. Let's take a look at the traditional corporate hierarchies, right? They usually want to sanitize and like build the workers to conform, to appease the higher ups. They're essentially forced to accept stagnation in order to climb the corporate ladder. How is this right? Number two, what does our side offer in contrast to theirs? Why do we say society must have entrepreneurship to combat this stagnation? Number one, to combat workplace complacency, glamorizing entrepreneurship can actually encourage people to be open in their options of the career, like my DP Ham has stated, widening the view of the corporate ladder causes, which is the tunnel vision into traditional workforce. We combat tunnel vision as a whole, right? Number two, the government might argue that, it might drain the top talent of the people, like in the traditional companies, away from the crucial traditional sectors that we need, like medicine or research. But they are completely neglecting the truth. Our DPM has already stated time and time again, entrepreneurship only modernizes the vital fields. Picture this, you are a 20-year-old veteran in a company, in a big company that possesses amazing skills. But you are restricted to a low position due to low engagement and because of the reasons that we have already told you, right? But on our side, we argue that this culture, this startup culture, actually inspires people who would otherwise remain passive employees to actively build solutions to combat what we're facing today. And we're giving them a medium to actually showcase their ability, right? So number three, why does their side cause stagnation whereas ours has innovation? Okay, so on their side, as we have stated time and time again, traditional paths have hierarchies, right? The government completely ignores how ideas cannot simply pass unless it passes through layers of executives. This environment basically incentivizes middle management to want to protect the status quo rather than implement the solutions. Why is this? Number one, traditional corporate incentives tie promotions and bonuses based on the hitting the safe and metrics that they've already predicted, because mistakes might cost them their career. Why is that? Two, they do not want any uncalculated risk that were introduced for the sake of trying to pass an idea to threaten their jobs. So ultimately, right, the personal downside of making a mistake usually far outweighs the upside of suggesting a risky idea that might revolutionize company. So now, this is a summary of the clash with the metrics. So the government kept spiraling on about three main metrics, right? Likelihood, experience, and time. So number one, about likelihood and experience, the government keeps telling you that the society will have less likelihood to succeed due to a lack of experience. But what do we tell you? We tell you that the likelihood of succeeding applies to both sides of the house. Does your side really think that succeeding in a traditional career path is easier than a startup business? And if so, did any of your speakers prove it? I will not be repeating any of my explanations from earlier, but I will tell you that experience that you gain from failing a startup is ultimately more valuable compared to the experience you gain from succeeding in the corporate ladder. Number two, time. We concede that startups do take time, right? But very simple question. Does it not take time to climb the corporate ladder? Does it not take time to build up towards and accept promotions? So in conclusion, I would like to present to you our world, Judge. Our side fully acknowledges what is going on in the status quo. It is stagnated. It is lacking with innovation. However, our side is trying to prove that we have to start from society. We have to start from influencing the society, because once the society changes, it changes the government that believes in hard work equates to success, meritocracy, right? Resulting in the government giving a better backup system. And the solution, we believe, is exclusively on our side of the house. And therefore, we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Opposition Whip. Opposition reply.
Hello, am I audible and visible?
Yes to both.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would start my speech in three. Oh, wait. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, good day. The whole government team case is very soft stance and very neglecting, as stated in our questions and POIs. The whole motion today is a regret motion. This house regrets. We expect from the proposition a framing of a work that this glamorization just simply does not exist, which we have to receive. Like, we have like zero input of it. Rather, they have eagerly wasted most of their case build up, accusing us flaws which do exist, okay, but are not exclusive to our sides. Judge, we do not buy this. We completely reject this uncharitable framing. My DLO has stated this debate is a direct choice between startup and traditional. If the government wants to prosecute our case, right, they must defend a concrete alternative work in which they have it. Because of that evasion, the entire case just does not have a premise at all. To start off, it doesn't even have a case. Before we start on the clashes, let us revise on what the government has done. First, what is the justification of their side with no glamorization causing experienced workers to suddenly become a startup? Second, how do you address the increased concentration of wealth in the status quo? Third, how do you address the increase of layoff due to AI? And how do you protect your citizens through government subsidies? Now, an important clash of today's debate is the succeeding rate on startup due to lack of resources. In their world, they say that, oh, you have survivorship bias, only a few will work out. But yes, that is the point. The proposition pessimistic stance on entrepreneurship hinders startups from forming in the first place, as pointed out by my PM, DPM, and WIT, right? Entrepreneurship is essential. This is a very core issue that comes from the proposition entirety of the case. In our world, we concede to you that failure is worth it and failure will happen. However, it is failure that what enables the success of others. It is what pushes innovation for society. We have told you why only one succeeding would actually outweigh the 99 to fail. Because in our world with tech-driven technology, this is what we're going to face in the future. Now, okay, let's look onto the side of engagement of our team towards their points. Let us look at the clashes from our stakeholders metric on four things. First, the society, mobility, and production. We measure from utility. Our side takes this clash home because their side locks talent into slow corporate ladders for incremental output, while startups actually drive massive social mobility economically, socially, and politically. Number two, political distribution of power. They tell us that, oh, in our world, everything will be more stagnated. However, it is their world that actually succumbs to this culture because startup culture decentralizes power across a very dynamic network of independent builders. Our side actually ensures a true pathway where civic dependence could be decreased. Number three, individuals that are influenced by this culture. Let's take it in two things, right? Traditional paths, they concentrate political influence within like corporate monopolies, which is very reliant on state bailouts, as my LO has already told you. Whereas startup culture, right, actually decentralizes the power through a dynamic network of independent builders, therefore having more individual autonomy and freedom. Number four, the only metric that is given from the government side, career stability. Yes, even if we concede this point to them, right, traditional paths offer short-term predictability, but how do you settle the sudden layoff risk? How do you settle the trend that a lot of companies right now, they sign workers not permanent but sign contract? These are some questions that are pointed out by my wit but are not replied. In contrast, right, this side of the house provided facts, figures, and comparisons on three things. One, when the majority of the workforce adopt an entrepreneurial mindset, the political and economic scale will improve. Number two, the impact of this view towards citizens, which is entrepreneurship glamorization, will affect the media, then the government through electoral power. Number three, most importantly, how we are willing to engage with the case. Our case build up is built up upon a very core thing, which is that even we point out the analysis of their framing is very impractical, which is very idealistic, which leads to two things: brain drain of capital and talent. Number two, succumbing to the rise of wealth concentration that will be worsened in their work. They do not try to combat this problem. Once again, right, I would like to restate the burden of proof for both sides. Both sides have to prove that which side could actually hit our social metrics, as mentioned just now. In today's debate, right, it requires really realistic portrayal of the society. Both sides need to, in which our side, we very blatantly tell you that glamorization is good, even with its flaws, even with its risks, because we need the glamorization to increase the percentage and statistic people to actually start a startup. We need them to combat the status quo of stagnation. Judge, we do not buy their framing that may seem realistic, yet it actually fails to adapt with modern metrics. Thus, it is evident that they have not just failed to meet their burden of proof, but to also challenge our team stance. Therefore, we are very proud to oppose.
Thank you so much, opposition reply. Government reply.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right, give me a few seconds. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1.
So firstly, I'd like to give a few clarifications. So firstly, on our side, startups still happen, just like how side opposition has mentioned. So just like how their side still has traditional career paths, we still have startups. Now, we have to clarify that whether or not they want to pursue a startup after working, after pursuing a traditional career path is entirely situational. It's based off of their personal wants and needs, and again, our end goal is to prove how even if they do start up a company, our side does it a lot better without glamorization. Now, secondly, side opposition has claimed that we failed to prove how young people conforming to this culture is bad. We have been stressing the importance of experience, about how the lack of experience will lead them to their downfall. Plus, young people taking risks is already a terrible idea because it's not just that they have nothing to lose, but they're investing in a lot, and that means that they lose just as much. And again, the sunken cost fallacy, they're just guaranteed to keep funding a failing project. Now, we've also never mentioned that it's guaranteed to rise to the top of the corporate ladder. Either way, it's a lot more realistic and likely to climb than to start out with nothing at all. Now, secondly, side opposition has failed to give us a mechanism at all. We've tried to address this problem again and again, but they've never given us a solution to how they're going to manage this. And they have also failed to consider our mechanism, which again is to work for a company first. That's our main priority, to pursue a traditional career path. And if they want to start up afterwards, then they can start up. And this fulfills our end goal a lot better than side opposition, because again, our end goal, again and again, we stress, is to find career stability. And even if through starting a company, we're going to prove how we can both start a company and find stability better without the glamorization of startup culture as compared to side opposition. Now, most importantly, they have also failed to prove why complacency and stagnation is the end of the world. And their solution to this is to take more risks, uncalculated risks. Why is it that inspiring them to take more risks just to solve complacency is good? You're talking about the harms of being a corporate worker. But how is it stagnation in the first place? You've never failed. You've never proved that in the first place. Now, again, on our side, startups still exist. And if that's rejecting stagnation, then we have it too. Then it's a shared benefit. Now, they also have yet to prove why the glamorization of startup culture is good. You've only been focusing on startup culture itself. They're focusing on the mindset, but the glamorization of it, the impacts, the benefits, you've mentioned nothing about that. Plus, we've already traded off that we will take longer time and to build a steadier foundation. For all of our arguments, this is what we're willing to trade off. However, for their side, they're trading off 99% of failed companies. Do you have any idea how many companies of those? Like, you're saying that you're prioritizing, you're saying that you're willing to bet on that one off chance to be OpenAI, and you're willing to give up all 99% of these failed companies. Do you know how many millions of failed startup companies those are? You're willing to give those up. We're saying that we will increase the percentages, the chance of you to actually survive as a company. Now, let me give you a brief summary of our impacts. So again, our impacts, firstly, the obstacles of starting a company is known. You have a higher chance of succeeding. You have more experience, more connections, and all of that. You are a lot more stable. Now, obviously, we take a lot longer time, but it's steadier, and we're willing to trade off that. Now, on side opposition, they're telling you that taking less time to start a company, that's the best thing. It's a lot more rushed, and that they're teaching you to take risks. And they're failing to address the problem of lots of people funding a failing project to not understand the risk of starting a company and to persevere and to actually succeed. And that's all for my speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Governor Reply. Thank you so much, debaters, for what was a wonderful round. You may now cross the House, and you may also go back to convening so that the judges can deliberate on the decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.